Well, Nicholas, thank you so much for joining the podcast. I really enjoyed your book, Leader as Healer, and I'm really looking forward to interview you about it.
Thank you.
But my first question is, if we think about leaders in our society, we usually think about the rational, results-driven, transactional leader that you call leader as executor. But in your book, Leader as Healer, you present a different type of leader. So what is the leader as the healer, and what makes him or her different from the leader as an executor?
Thank you, Dirk. First of all, a pleasure to be here. So I would describe the critical difference as being one of bandwidth. So for me, because I meet so many leaders, most of whom are in the category of leader as executor, because that's our model. For me, it's a very narrow perceptual and experiential bandwidth, and it's dominated by linear thinking, which also means there's a high degree of disconnection. There's a disconnection from the body, from the emotions, from the intuition, and actually from the soul.
Hmm.
So my whole work and the whole work of Leader as Healer is saying, actually, our highest possibility, and I believe the one that is needed now, is a bandwidth like that. I also call it activating whole self intelligence, because I think the narrow bandwidth has a very linear intelligence. And as the world gets, as we know, more and more complex and unstable, it's really not enough.
Yeah, yeah, and we get to that wholeness later in the conversation. Can you share some of, let's say, the ways that leaders as healers can make a positive difference for the organizations and the people working from them? So how do their teams and organizations look different from those of the leaders as executors?
Right. Some very key ways: levels of energy, levels of engagement, because as we know, there's a global crisis of disengagement, even 80%. Much higher levels of creativity, new thinking, and also actually much higher levels of really strong implementation and action. So
Hmm.
it's a much more energized, much more connected culture. And I believe one in which people will experience much more meaning
Hmm.
and therefore much more satisfaction. We spend so much of our life at work, and all too often we're doing it because we need to, rather than it being a source of real life enhancement. So
Yeah,
I think on every level, Leader as Healer brings much higher rewards of all kinds, from satisfaction and also most critically to high performance.
yeah,
I mean, the more I do this work, the more I will argue that there is no business case for not embracing this,
yeah. Can,
because
can,
cultures everywhere I go are not functioning well. People are highly stressed, and not get. And the thing is, maybe we'll come on to this, but our critical thinking works much better when all of our energy is flowing, which is why people often say they have their best ideas when they're exercising.
yeah,
So this narrow bandwidth doesn't produce high quality critical thinking.
no. No, and basically you already indicated the complexity that our current society faces. I mean, what I find interesting is that your book became the business book of the year.
Mm.
And if I look at other business books that are typically become business books of the year, they're completely different. They either have, let's say, a strong concept to implement or restructure something, or they're numbers driven, or they're more, right about, how to bring a product to market, etc. Um, but I think The Leader as a Healer seems a very unusual choice for a business book of the year. I mean, if I would summarize it, and I'm very happy to basically take your comments, but if I would summarize it for listeners, then I think on the one hand it centers around becoming a whole person, and on the other hand, with connecting ourselves to the wider system that we are a part of, because to help our listeners, chapter titles include The Foundation, Doing and Being, Embracing Emotions, The Power of Embodiment, Living a Life of Purpose, The Practice and Mindfulness of Meditation, The Call. Why do you think your book was selected as Business Book of the Year 2023? And what does that tell us about the times we're living in?
Well, first of all, in all honesty, I was totally astonished.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
Um, and I'll never forget the evening when we went, expecting that we were just going to a nice party, basically. There were 300 books entered, and there were 14 categories of leadership, of business book. So I knew I was a finalist in the leadership category, which I was already surprised by.
Yeah, I think so, because
Anyway,
it's a
when we got
steep competition.
when we got to
Yeah.
that section, I was astonished to win it, Leadership Book of the Year. So then at the end of the evening, the head judge, really impressive woman, said, look, my job the last 2 months has been to read all 14 winners of each category and choose what I believe is the business book of the year. And she started describing the book she had chosen. And I was like, surely, no, can't be. And then she basically, listen, virtually verbatim, she said, I believe this is the book that everyone needs to read now.
Yeah.
And she chose it. So I do think, Dirk, that it is a sign of the times. I think it is an affirmation that many of the ways we have come to normalize are really broken and that something new is needed. I really took it as a huge affirmation of that.
Yeah. And if you think about the things that are broken, Nicholas, can you mention a couple of examples of things that you see around us that are broken and need to be, to use the title of your book, healed?
I, like you, Dirk, I meet a lot of leaders from many different organizations, and mostly what I hear is very stressed environments, very poor relational skills, um, very low tolerance of emotion, and we'll come on to why that's so
Yeah.
important, and basically very dehumanized environments. So, and that's why, to make a business case for that being the right way to do business, it's ridiculous because people do not perform at their best. They don't have the best ideas. To have real creative ideas, we need to have a very fully engaged team. And we also need to be able to reside in much deeper levels of being. There's doing, which is very proactive, very important.
Yeah.
And there's being, which is much more receptive. And I love the American philosopher who said, sometimes the solution requires a walk around the lake.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are very few cultures that have time for a walk around the lake.
Yeah. Yeah.
Many teams I work with start their meetings with 2 minutes silence.
Yeah.
So in the old model, it's like, we don't have time for that. I mean, that's a waste of time. No, because every team that does that has much higher level conversation.
Yeah.
So what's the business case for not doing that? The
Yeah.
only reason we don't do that is fear.
Nee, and what I also found interesting in the book is, contrary to let's say all the titles that I described and the topics we discussed, you also mention that yeah, leader as a healer sometimes they also use the scalpel, and I quote from your book. He or she understands that feeling and empathy are essential, but not always sufficient. True leadership sometimes requires that one decisively excise moral and spiritual tumors from the bodies of organizations or nations. And, like all good surgeons, healers seek to preserve any and all healthy tissue to the greatest extent possible. That sounds slightly different than what we discussed before, but can you tell me, what is, let's say, the relationship between the scalpel and the healer, and in which situations do you think, a scalpel would be a good instrument to use for a leader in an organization?
I think that's very simple. We are going to come back to emotions, right?
Yeah.
Because we've gone around. So it's very simple, Dirk. If someone is really underperforming and or creating a lot of tension and conflict, and you give them every opportunity to address that, but you clearly arrive at a point where no change is happening, they have to go. That's the scalpel.
Yeah.
It can be as simple as that.
Yeah.
We're not here to take care of everyone, but you will have given someone every opportunity, reasonable
Yeah.
opportunity. Yeah.
So now we come to the emotions. I think that's also a part that we extensively pre-discussed and seem to have trouble to stay away from. Now, I've always been taught by my peers and leaders in the business world that emotions are essentially useless. They obscure the fact, and facts need to be restrained because the ideal way of making decisions in business is applying impeccable intellectual logic to objective facts. We seem to plead for letting emotions back in our decision-making process.
Yeah.
Is that assumption correct? And where does your reappreciation of emotion stem from?
I'm laughing, Dirk, because what you say you've been taught, and I know you don't necessarily believe it anymore, is so stupid. It's such a misunderstanding of the human being. And it's guaranteed to turn the workforce, the workplace, into a dehumanized, soulless environment. There is also, I believe, no such thing as a rational decision. We are all carrying all the time degrees of emotion. And I'll give you a very simple example of why this is important, and we can maybe look a bit deeper. Let's say X is leading a team meeting, and she or he notices, hopefully, that there's a lot of anxiety in the room. So she or he has a choice at that point. And it's an important strategic discussion.
I agree, yeah.
Do they keep going and ignoring the anxiety, which means that everyone is sitting there and they have taken on, it's not okay to be anxious. So I have to sit here and pretend I'm okay. And therefore I sit here like this and I'm trying to think. Or does she or he simply say, just a minute, everyone. I can feel a high degree of anxiety here. It's normal. I feel it too. I'm not sleeping well, and I'm sure that's true for many of you. Let's just acknowledge that together and make it okay. So what happens in that moment is collectively, it's okay to be anxious. So first of all, there's a relaxation. And secondly, and this is maybe a more subtle topic, emotions are life energy. So the idea that they're useless is so crazy, it's hard to believe why anyone would think that. But the reason someone would think that is that they're scared of their emotions. And quite normally and rightfully so. Because when we were children, we all had emotions that were not supported, not adequately met. And our only possibility was to close them. But they didn't go away, they're living inside us.
Yeah.
So we will therefore then develop a belief system that no, emotions are negative. Fear is negative. Fear is not negative in any way at all, because the moment someone feels safe enough to feel their fear, to stop explaining it and just feel it, their energy opens. They usually feel their body much more. They come alive much more. So we're living in cultures that we've normalized numbness. We've normalized a very shallow level of relationality. We've normalized it. So the whole idea that emotions don't matter has to be thrown out.
Yeah.
Just as there is no such thing as a purely rational decision. And I believe, and I have good evidence of it, that boardrooms make important decisions that are made by 5-year-olds. I really mean that. People who are carrying so much unfelt emotion, and it's affecting everything in the way they act, perceive, and think.
Yeah. Nicholas, if leaders that are executors have the idea that they want to embark on a journey of, becoming more a whole person and also connecting, let's say, more intensively with the wider system they're a part of, and want to develop, let's say, themselves into, leader as a healer, what are some of the obstacles that they would have to deal with along that journey?
The obstacles. Well, they first of all need to wake up to the kind of prison that they've normalized living in, which has been taught to them. There's no blame here whatsoever. Then they will need to understand that to really embark on a journey of development, mostly they will need to find a mentor. And they will need to understand that some of the journey will be really exciting and inspirational, and some of it will be very uncomfortable, because they're going to need to face parts of themselves that they long ago put in the cupboard. So they need a commitment, and they need a good mentor, and they need to understand that they're going to embark on a really life-changing journey, which will affect their personal life and their professional life.
Yeah.
And, like you, I'm sure I hear many beautiful examples of, someone says, I picked my son up from school today, and normally it's just blah, 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 nothing really. And we had the best conversation we've ever had.
Yeah.
That's meaningful. That's meaningful. Or a CEO in a board meeting writes me, I stopped the meeting halfway through today and I said, how's everyone feeling? And the whole meeting, he said, went to a totally different level.
Yeah. Nicholas, the other question I have is in your book Leader as a Healer, you also describe a whole series of practical exercises leaders can do along that journey. Can you mention a couple of them just to illustrate that point?
Yes, thank you, Dirk. I mean, this is really important. Anyone in any medium who wants to be really good at what they do practices. And they don't just practice the outer skill, important though that is. A lot of it, like athletes, sports people, they have a huge inner practice.
Yeah.
Because at the top level, their skills are probably comparable. But there's a whole inner practice. Same with a musician, the same with leaders. The same, if you look at anyone who really does something great in their life, you will see they have a whole inner practice.
Yeah.
So I try to make some of them very, very simple. And one of the most effective ones I teach that I'm told really makes an enormous difference for people is what I call the difference between being on a forward circle and a backward circle. So this has many layers, but at its most simple, most of the time, I think most people are on a forward circle. And that means I'm going to relate to you like that. My whole energy is up, I'm not grounded, and it's forward. And I may even think that's how I listen. But actually, I'm not really here. I've left my home. The backward circle is I come back and I drop down and I have a feeling of I'm here. But that's it, the most simple. So when people start to really, first of all, feel that, and we may go through a whole process, so people really feel the difference, then they're sitting in a meeting or they're about to go on a Zoom call and they check, am I really here? And what do I need to do to get into that backward circle? Which doesn't mean I go slow, but it means I feel here. And that's game changing. And it's the same on Zoom. How much am I really here? Or like you said, how much am I just waiting to say what's next in my mind? So that's one big practice. And linked to that, there's a very masterful practice where I learn to have inner and outer attention at the same time. So I attend to my inner space and the outer space at the same time. And that would be a definition of presence as well. I'm really here and I'm fully available to the outside and it's a continuous inner and outer. So I'm not lost in my inner world and I'm not lost in the outer world.
Right.
That's a very, very refined practice. And again, I have many examples where people tell, that really, really makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And the body, everyone needs to do deep body work. Everyone. We're so disconnected from our body. I had a beautiful example once.
Yeah, we see the body as a vessel for our intellectual
Thinking.
capabilities.
I've
Yeah,
heard,
exactly.
I've heard
It's a vessel which we start to maintain way too late in our lives.
exactly.
But yeah. No, it's almost like you could almost say, look, the body is a vessel. The emotions are useless. It's our
I'm a thinker.
It's our
I'm a
thinking.
thinker.
Yeah, I'm a thinker. Yeah, and unfortunately,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, and we lose so much. There is such a huge dimension of experience through the body, of
Yeah.
feeling deeply at home.
I think you've again given me so much stuff to think about, Nicholas. I really feel blessed. I mean, first of all, reading your book basically already gave me a world of ideas and a different perspective. And I think also in this conversation, I think there is so much stuff that you freely share to think about it. I really want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Nicholas, we discussed a wide range of topics around leader as the healer. Is there anything we haven't covered which you say, well, that's an important point, I want to mention that, or are there
Yes.
any final thoughts from your sides that you would like to share?
Both.
Good. Well, we have all the opportunity to do that.
Okay. So one very important thing, why is meditation so important? So there's a very simple image in many mystical traditions which says that when you open the page of a book, you have all the black letters and you have a white page.
Yeah.
Now, in our doing forward circle, we have only the black letters. But the white page is a vast dimension of life, of connection, of subtle new ideas. So we miss that at great, great cost. So mindfulness, even throughout the day, is what I teach. And then sitting meditation, you'll find most high performers have some version of that. And I quote in my book a long list of very well-known business people who will basically say it's one of the most important things I do because it opens the white page. So that's one thing. My basic message, Dirk, is that given the state of the world, which I believe is getting worse and worse, it's never been more urgent to wake up out of the coma of absence and disconnection and move into the fullness of who we are, and therefore the actions and innovations and changes that are really needed now. I think we're at a very critical point.
Yeah.
We need more and more people to wake up.
Thank you. I would agree with you.
Mm.
Thank you so much, Nicholas, for being a guest on this podcast.
Thank you, Dirk. It's really been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.